Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. So I appreciate you taking time out from your diary, being here. This is a 60-minute session. We're focusing on EU Act, specifically in terms of the timelines and what it really means, specifically for UK organizations. What does it really mean for you if your organization is based in UK? And also look at a roadmap for next 6 months. And also, we have Martijn with us. Martijn is the tech sales lead for EMEA for IBM watsonx Governance. So he will be giving us a demo of the platform and the key features of the platform, how it ties into helping organizations achieve compliance, not just compliance, actually treating this as more of a competitive advantage for them if they implement AI governance the right way. So this webinar, you will learn all those things, what it is important, and how to do it. And the how part is the one where Martijn will explain that and give us a demo of one of the most leading platforms in AI governance, which is watsonx Governance. So we will go through that. So hi, I'm Gurpreet. I'm the responsible AI director for Align AI, which is a boutique AI governance consulting firm based out of London. We are IBM partners, and we are experts in the IBM governance tooling and the other tools around Orchestrate and Open Pages, GRC platform. And we've been doing this for more than 10 years. So we are the experts in that. And we're coming today here to share more from our experience of working with our clients and prospects, what their key questions are, and answering those in this webinar as well for your benefit. And as I said, we have Martijn with us from the tech sales team for IBM, and he will be covering the IBM watsonx Governance demo. Our links to our LinkedIn profiles and website and everything will be shared in the chat, so you can get connected with us and we can talk later on if you have any questions, if we don't get enough time to cover everything in this call. So let's kick on. So let me start with a number that should get everybody's attention. So 3/4 of UK financial services firms are already using AI. But here is the challenge. Only 14% of boards are regularly discussing it, and we are just 9 months away from the EU Act's high-risk system requirements taking full effects. And here is what makes this urgent for UK firms. Despite Brexit, if your AI systems touch EU markets or users, and let's be honest, most of yours do, you are in scope. So if your systems touch EU markets or users, then you are in scope. So it's not a case of, okay, UK is out of EU, so we don't need to worry about this. So the penalties are quite considerable, up to 35 million or up to 7% of the global turnover. And it's much higher than that for the GDPR. It's almost double of the fines for GDPR. So significant financial implications if you are found non-compliant. So here is the opportunity. The firms that get this right early, they don't just avoid the fines, they actually unlock a competitive advantage in what PwC estimates as a 550 billion AI opportunity by 2035. So there's significant gains to be had by implementing and deploying AI and using AI the right way. So let's talk about how to be in that winning group. How do you achieve that? So before we actually jump into the webinar and the meat of the webinar, I have a question for everybody. So if you can help answer this, simple question is, does your organization have a complete inventory of all AI systems? So if you can answer in yes, in progress, not yet, don't know, it will give a sense of where you guys are. And if it is something which is not relevant to you, you're not aware, as I said, the option is there, don't know. But if you are aware of it, probably if you can share that, that'll be quite helpful. And in our conversations with various organizations, we are finding that most of the organizations still don't have a complete inventory of AI systems, especially with the generative AI now, where AI is being used by almost everybody. So the service area is much bigger across the whole organization. And not just the technical people, everybody's using AI. So how do you have that, like visibility into that AI, what AI is being used in the organization? So I'll be interested to know if you're aware of this, and if it is, where you are in that journey. And we'll look at the results a bit later on. So let's get started with understanding the AOI Act from the timelines perspective. So what's in force right now? So if you see here, so it came into play in August 2024, where it entered into force. Then February this year, 2nd February this year, prohibited AI practices, they were banned, which is so active now. So you can't deploy, if you are using any prohibited AI practices, then you will be fined immediately. It's already in play. From August this year, the GPI obligations, general purpose AI obligations, they came into enforcement. We'll touch a bit more upon these as well again. And the next year, August, is the critical deadline where the high risk system obligations come into play. And then there is some more compliance to come or roll out from August to 2027. And every organization have to be ready for compliance by that date. So those are the key timelines from EU AI Act perspective. Now, as I touched upon earlier, that the UK post-Brexit reality is that even if we are not in EU anymore, your organization is in scope. So when UK organizations, when do they need to comply? So if your AI systems are placed in the EU market, your AI systems are available to AI users, your AI system outputs used within EU territory, or UK firms with EU subsidiaries or operations, or if you are processing data of EU located individuals. In that case, EU AI Act applies to your organization. So obviously, UK has its own way of looking at AI governance and the AI regulation part, which is more pro-innovations. It's principles-based approach. I think it's still evolving. It's not set in stone at the moment. Whereas EU has taken the lead and gone for a risk-based, legally binding approach, and they have set up a dedicated AI office, and they've gone ahead and created this world-leading AI regulation, which a lot of other countries are taking inspiration from and implementing or creating their own rules and regulations around it. Now, just to understand how EU AI Act classifies AI, it's classified into 4 different layers or 4 different bands. The topmost one, or the strictest one, which is completely banned outright, is called prohibited. So AI systems which are used for social scoring, emotional recognition in workplace education, or the facial recognition, all these systems, basically, they are completely banned. You can't use them. Obviously, government has some things where government can create, but private organizations, they can't create or use any of these AI systems. The penalties for these are the highest or strictest, so up to 35 million or 7% of the annual turnover. Now, the second one is the high risk systems. And this is the one which is coming into play next year, August. And this is where most of the financial services AI lives, basically. So credit scoring for natural persons, so mortgage approvals, insurance risk assessments, pricing for individuals, all your HR systems for recruitment and performance evaluations. All these require full compliance treatment, like including conformity assessments, technical documentation, human oversight, registration in the EU database. And the penalty for this tier is up to 15 million euros or 3% of the turnover. The third tier here is the limited risk. Now, there's a common misconception that all AI in banking is high risk, which is not the case. So fraud detection systems have an explicit exemption. B2B lending is low risk. Internal processes optimization that doesn't affect customers typically falls into minimal risk. So the Act focuses on systems that materially affect access to essential services or fundamental rights. So limited risk systems just need transparency, telling users they are interacting with AI, labeling AI generated content. Also, you still need to have a record of all your AI systems, even if it is limited risk system, and that you have done the risk assessment around the system, that definitely it is a limited risk system. So you need to go through that for each and every system, irrespective of whether it's prohibited, high risk, limited risk. And there are systems which come under minimal risks, and these ones actually, there are no requirements for this from a compliance perspective, like things like spam filters, which sit in your email inboxes, inventory management, some back office automation. And so most of the AI systems actually come into this minimal risk. But then if you don't do the classification or assessment of your systems, you won't know where it fits. So it all starts by knowing which all AI systems are being used in the organization. So you need a complete inventory, and then you need a risk assessment around all your systems so you can categorize them. And then accordingly, you can start the rest of the process from a governance perspective, which we're going to look at next. So from the UK perspective, the key impacts, who's preparing how. So there's an example, and I might have to skip some slides in the interest of time as well. So HSBC took a sort of lead where they set up this AML compliance check automation, which helped them reduce their investigations by 20%. They achieved top 10 global banks for AI maturity. So their early governance investment is paying dividends now. So from a UK market perspective, the stats are that 75% of UK financial services firms currently use AI, but only 33% of AI use cases involve third-party implementations. And this has increased from 2022. This is significant, it's almost doubled up. And top 3 providers dominate the market, and 73% of the AI systems live in cloud, 40% models, and 33 data. So the top 3 providers, obviously, the Amazon, AWS, Azure, and Google. Only 48% monitor production systems for accuracy and drift. So lack of governance is quite evident, and this is all kind of stats because we don't have clear stats around generative AI yet. If you include the generative AI systems, these numbers will look much worse. Now let's look at the governance perspective. From an AI governance, there are 3 key pillars of AI governance, and we're going to look at each one of those now. So the first pillar is documentation and transparency. So for every high-risk AI system, you need comprehensive technical documentation. Think of it as a complete biography of your model. What data trained it? How was it validated? What are its limitations? What decisions did you make during development and why? And this is not optional, it's mandatory before you can place the system into the market. So the concept of AI fact sheets, essentially like nutritional labels for models, has become the industry standard, and What's Next governance has all that functionality for it, which again, Martijn is going to explain as part of the demo. The pillar 2 is risk management and monitoring. So this is not a one-time assessment, basically. So you need a systematic risk identification throughout the AI lifecycle, from planning through deployment and ongoing operation. That means continuous monitoring for model drift, bias, performance, degradation, and security vulnerabilities. So you need quality management systems that would satisfy a notified body audit. And when something goes wrong, you need serious incident reporting procedures ready to go. So you need really good tooling for AI governance. And again, that's where a world-leading platform like What's Next governance comes into play. Pillar 3 is the human oversight and accountability. So Article 14 in EU Act is unambiguous about this. It says high-risk systems must be designed with effective human oversight mechanism. This isn't about having someone in the room. It's about qualified personnel with the competence, training, and authority to understand the systems, monitor for anomalies, and intervene when necessary. So for certain biometric systems, you need verification by at least 2 natural persons. And now here's the practical reality. These 3 pillars map directly to international standards you may already be working towards. So ISO 42001 for AI management systems, NIST AI risk management framework, ISO 23894. So if you're building towards these standards, you're building towards EU AI Act readiness. So all these frameworks converge actually. So it's good to invest into from compliance perspective, because then you are covering yourself from those standards and aligning with those standards as well. Next, we're going to look at one of the most operationally challenging requirements, which is the conformity assessment. So from EU Act perspective. So before you can place a high-risk AI system on the market or put it into service, you must demonstrate compliance. And there are two pathways, and you need to ascertain which one applies to you, and based on that, choose the right path for you. So most high risk systems like a bank's credit scoring, HR systems, insurance pricing can use internal control. So you conduct a self-assessment, verify your quality management system complies, examine your technical documentation, draw up an EU declaration of conformity, affix the CE marking, and register in the EU database. So you control the timeline, but you are also on the hook if it goes wrong. So this is where you are doing the self-assessment. So this conformity assessment, after completing it, you have to register with the EU database. So that's the whole process. So you can either do it yourself or you can use a third party. So let's say for a biometric identification systems and systems where harmonized standards don't exist, must go through a third party assessment by a notified body. And these bodies can demand full access, and I mean full access to your training data, your models, even your development premises. They issue a certificate which is valid for 4 years and subject to periodic audits. Now, here is the bottleneck everyone's worried about, the notified body capacity. So as of October 2025, only 3 EU member states have designated both notifying and market surveillance authorities. So there's going to be a crunch in 2026 when the deadlines start approaching as everyone rushes to the door. So the harmonized standards from CEN that were supposed to arrive in April 2025 have been pushed into 2026, adding uncertainty. So if you think it's 9 months away, but then everybody keeps on thinking that there's going to be a rush, and that can have its own implications as well. So it's better to start early and preparing, because it's not like flipping a switch. It does need dedicated time and investment into hiring the right people, defining the right processes, and bringing in the right tooling, and then the implementation around it. Next, what does this really mean practically? So when you look at this, so start your documentation now. Don't wait until second quarter of 2026, thinking you will dash across the finish line. The firms with quality management systems, operational, technical documentation prepared, and governance processes embedded will sail through. The ones scrambling at the last minute will face delays, potential market access restrictions, and significant competitive disadvantage. So the good news is there are tools that can dramatically accelerate this process, automating much of the documentation, monitoring, and evidence gathering you need, which brings us to how leading organizations are approaching this. So now I want to connect this regulatory requirements with something more fundamental, which is the principles of responsible and trustworthy AI. So when EU AI Act was created, it was not created in a vacuum. It actually built on years of work by the high-level expert group on AI, which established 7 key requirements for trustworthy systems, which are listed here. So human agency and oversight, accountability, societal and environment well-being, technical robustness and safety, privacy and data governance, transparency, diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness. So these, obviously, we won't have time to go through each and every one in this conversation today, but hopefully we can do future webinars and cover these in more detail. But these are not just nice to haves. They are woven throughout the Act's legal requirements, basically, all these principles of trustworthy AI. So Article 10 on data governance directly implements the privacy and fairness principles. Article 14 on human oversight codifies human agency. Article 15 on accuracy and robustness makes technical robustness legally mandatory. And if you look at fairness, transparency, and accountability here, so for fairness, you're conducting bias detection in training data, running fairness audits across demographic groups, testing with diverse populations. So similarly, for transparency, you are creating model cards. For accountability, you're assigning designated owners for each AI system. So all these are part of the processes that we'll need to implement to make sure you're compliant. And you will need people, process, and tooling accordingly. Now, from a AI governance tech stack perspective, let's just come to that now. Once we understand EU AI Act, the timelines, the categorization of systems, then we looked at conformity assessment, and then also tying it with responsible AI. From an AI governance technology stack perspective, it's actually consists of 4 layers, let's say, but the most important, the foundational layer is your AI systems. So you have all AI systems which are coming from everywhere. So some organizations might have models in AWS SageMaker, some in Azure ML, so on and so forth, or you might be using OpenAI's ChatGPT models. So basically, you need this layer where you have your AI system. This is your core layer of AI, basically. And in a survey by Bank of England, 33% of AI use cases now involve third-party implementations. That's up from 17% in 2022, which I mentioned earlier. And the top 3 providers dominate the market. So that's the first layer, which is your AI systems. The second layer on top is your governance layer with specific capabilities here. So you need model inventory and cataloging. So you can't govern what you don't know exists. So the first step is cataloging all your AI systems. Then risk assessment and classification, which is aligned with EU AI Act's 4-tier system. You need automated documentation and audit trail generation, because manual generation at scale is impossible, especially with generative AI. Continuous monitoring for drift, bias, performance degradation, and security issues, explainability and fairness testing tools, workflows, and approval mechanisms involving your risk, compliance, legal, and business teams, and compliance reporting that can demonstrate to a regulator or notified body that you have met every requirement. The other 2 layers here are the integration layer, which is the governance layer integrating with your enterprise AI systems like your GRC platforms, IT service management, data catalog, security tools, so on and so forth. And after that is the value layer. So if you invest into these and you do these things the right way, you get this value at the top, which is faster time to production for AI initiatives because you have clear approval pathways. You have reduced compliance risk because monitoring is continuous and automated. Audit readiness because documentation is comprehensive and always current. There's stakeholder confidence, your board, your customers, your regulators, because you can demonstrate responsible AI. And ultimately, competitive advantage because you can innovate at speed while others are stuck in the compliance paralysis. So it's important to realize that it's not just a tick box activity. Actually, it's an enabler to innovate faster, to deploy your AI faster, and gain competitive advantage. And the smart organizations are already doing that. So the critical insight here is that you need a platform agnostic approach. Your governance platform must work with AI from any vendor, on any cloud, in any environment. Locking into a single vendor's ecosystem is no longer viable for most enterprises. So you need governance that works across your entire AI landscape. So this leads us nicely to now understanding how organizations are actually implementing this at scale. And this is where I hand over to Martijn. So I'm going to stop my screen share and bring in Martijn, who will share more regarding what's the next governance and what it is and how it works, and he's going to give us a live demo as well. So over to you, Martijn.
Yeah, thank you very much, Gurpreet, for all of that introduction and setting the scene. And thanks for having me on. By way of introduction, I'm part of the EMEA technical sales team, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And for the past 3.5 years or so, I've been focused on the topic of trustworthy AI and the software solutions that we have for that within IBM. So I'm going to just take 2 or 3 pictures at the beginning, and then I'm trying to get to the live demo as quickly as possible to show you a bit, as Gurpreet said, about how do we actually do this, right? How can you implement this in software? There's a fair amount of work to be done with all of this, and how do we help with technology to streamline that, to make sure that we can get to that value layer while not breaking the bank in effort and having data scientists spend hours and hours and days of work on documenting things, for example. So that's where the technology can help, right? I think the need is clear from what Gurpreet all just described, but then how do we actually make that happen in a way that is efficient, that brings together the different people that get involved in this process? So even from a compliance management perspective, right, but there's broader risks than just a compliance risk. But even from a pure compliance perspective, the compliance team is going to need other people to help them do that, right? They are not the ones that are going to be the ones that make an AI system robust and secure, right? They're not going to be the ones that build and manage a risk management framework, for example. So it is really kind of a combination of stakeholders and personas that need to come together. Again, with the technology, we try to make it easy as possible to connect these people together. I don't think that anybody, including IBM ourselves, have completely cracked the code on how to do this. So this is very much learning and maybe a bit of a kind of an ambition statement, but I think that's where organizations should strive to get towards and use technology to make it easier. Not just to do the initial assessment for the EU AI Act, for example, but then also have a way to connect up all the other stakeholders, bring them into the process so they can contribute their work to it. And the security team, they're going to need to do certain things as part of an AI deployment, and the AI developers, obviously, and the business units, the one that typically have the main responsibility for some of these things and making sure that things get done. So bringing together these different stakeholders is, again, another point where technology is very suitable to make that happen, automated workflows that assign tasks to the right person at the right time and so forth. So we'll show a little bit about that in the context of the EU AI Act compliancy, but given the time available, I'm not going to have time to kind of demo the whole breadth of the platform, but happy to do that in follow-up for anybody who's interested. And what we've seen with these different stakeholders, obviously, they all come from their own perspective. As an AI developer, for example, how do I know what requirements there are? How do I know if this is a high risk or a low risk or a transparency requirements? How do I know the things I need to do? Right? AI developers are not lawyers. They're not risk specialists. They're not security SMEs. How do they know? Is there an easy way that they can get a list of the things that they need to contribute to? And then once they've done the work, how do they provide the evidence that work has been done according to the needs? And then the compliance SME over here on the bottom left, right? They're not the ones that are going to be working in what's next in Azure, in SageMaker to do these things, but how do they know that the work is done and the evidence is there for them to do? So that's where an AI platform and AI governance software can help to bring these things together and streamline that process across the different people and across the different stakeholders here. So in the context of a compliance lifecycle, I've kind of simplified it a little bit. We've got the compliance SME, the use case owner, who's typically more on the business side of things, the line of business, AI developers and others that might be involved, just to keep the picture a little bit simpler. The way we typically see it happen is that it starts with the use case owner in the line of business. They are the ones that have a particular business problem they think AI can help solve. They know what it's supposed to be doing. They know what data is necessary to do that. They know what people need to be using the system in order to achieve the objectives and so forth. So that's something that's kind of uniquely theirs, typically, to document that use case. What is it this use case is supposed to be doing, and then classify that. Again, they're not a compliance SME, so that's something where they might get a little help from the compliance SMEs. I don't think you want to run everything by the compliance SME every single time, because that means these people don't get to do their day jobs. So for some way of collaborating or developing standardized tools that a business owner can do their own assessment, but it's being built and maintained and with the support of a compliance SME. So that's where we're going to pick up the story on the demo side in just a minute, assuming this is done. Again, the platform supports this process as well, and doing that and doing risk assessment and so forth. Just in the interest of time, we're gonna start assuming that we are at this place in the workflow where that use case is registered, the information is available, and the initial assessment has been done. There can be reviews. Again, we're going to assume that those things have been done. The next step then is to say, okay, if your legal assessment is that this is a high-risk use case in the AI Act, or if you want to use as an organization of voluntary standards like NIST or ISO or one of these things, what are then the things we need to do? That list can be very short, can be very long. If something is minimal risk in the AI Act, that list is really short. If something is high risk and you're the maker of that solution, that list is quite long. So things differ from one to the other use case, but that's where the assessment and kind of pre-built compliance plans help to make that clear. If this is high risk, the software has a list, a predefined list of the obligations that come with that. And then you can assign them to the right people. Some things will be done by an AI developer. Some things might still be the remit of the compliance SME, like what the conformity assessment that Gurpreet just covered. Right, you probably don't want to have an individual data scientist registering things with the EU. That's probably something that still falls to the compliance team. So they've got their part to play in a life cycle of an AI solution. But just being able to know what the different obligations are, assign them. It's typically still the use case owner that's responsible for bringing that together, making sure that everybody contributes and everybody does their thing. But that's where the other personas, the developers and the other stakeholders come in. They are the ones that actually need to build it in a way that's secure and that it's robust and that it's accurate and that it's, all these things. So piecing out and assigning the task and the different obligations to the right stakeholders, and then gathering the evidence and helping them do that and chasing them right with due dates and things like that. So again, that's what the software all automates to help do that and help manage that process. When the evidence is then all there is a step again in coordination with the compliance SME to do an assessment, to review that evidence and determine if it meets the obligation, yes or no, according to the legal standards. There might be some rework there. There's an arrow going back there if the compliance SME has further questions or they think something should be a little more detailed, for example. They can send that back for rework. It comes back here, and you can go find the right SME to help with that and can send it back in. At some point, that is going to be done. This use case is now in compliance status. We understand what the use case is about. We have the evidence in the system that if somebody comes calling from the outside, or if we need to report on this to the outside, we have that information all in one place. We have it reviewed. The human oversight, as Gurpreet has named it, has been in place, and we track everything. We track exactly what user does what kind of things and so forth. And then the last step in here is reporting and kind of managing anything at a more aggregate level. So looking at different business units, looking at different mandates, how are we doing against those things? Again, more the task of a compliance SME to look at their organization in the aggregate and see where things are going well, where maybe we need some extra help, where we need some extra attention. And I've drawn a dotted line across the top there. This experience of doing this several times is something that might lead you to go back in and update some of these tools that might be available, right? So an assessment tool and the compliance plans. As organizations get smarter about this, they might have figured out that maybe initially they were a bit too strict and they might be able to loosen some things, or there were issues that came up and incidents that happened and we need to be a bit stricter. So that's not something that's set for life and that's going to roll in forever, but there's kind of a loop there to make sure that those learnings are captured and we bring them back in. Had a customer a couple of months ago, I spoke to. Their initial questionnaire for assessment was about 800 questions long. They figured out for themselves that was a bit overboard, so they were trying to work that down to a manageable set. But that's kind of the learning that everybody's going through now. And again, to the point of Gurpreet, this needs to be ready in 9 months. So that learning, you don't want to do that, while the requirement is active. That's the kind of learning you can start doing right now, and make sure that when that date hits, that you're in a decent shape and you've got some of these things done a few times. You've ironed out some of the kinks in a process like this and figured out what's what is what. So I'm going to show you a little bit of this live. As mentioned, it's going to pick up there where the use case has been assessed. We know what the requirements are, and I'm going to take you through that process there to figure out the appropriate compliance plan, capture some of the evidence, go through the assessment, and then have a look at the reporting capability and some of the library maintenance that happens in the top row in this swim lane chart. All right, so let me switch over to the live environment here. So when I log into WhatsNext Governance, I land on a dashboard, something like this, where I can see for our use cases, for our development and our deployment activities, kind of some basic information here about what's going on, what do we have, our inventory of use cases and models and other technical assets, and anything from monitoring, for example, that we see Fairness is one of the things I've got listed here on my dashboard. You can configure this to show the things that you're interested in, but are the fairness metrics that we're monitoring. So we've got AI solutions running live, and we're keeping an eye on them to make sure that different age groups or different genders or different, whatever we might be worried about for a particular use case, that they are getting kind of equal fair treatment. And the ones in green are fine. The ones in red, those are things where we see something that's out of the threshold that we set, so reasons to go investigate. So this is my high-level dashboard of anything going on with AI and AI governance in my part of the organization. Depending on my role, I can see maybe just my own department. Maybe if I'm a compliance person, I might have a slightly broader view. I can look across some of our business units. So that's all baked in here, that it's, you see only the right things, the things you have to worry about, and nothing more, nothing less. So where I want to pick this up, this is not just a kind of a nice picture with data and dashboards, but this is where we actually do things. From here, I could start a new use case. I can register a new model. I can, do all the things you see here. I've already built one because I said, we're going to pick this up with a use case that is already where the assessment has been done. Okay, and that's log me out. Let's go back in. It timed out from the testing I did before we got started with the webinar. All right, so here we are. This is my use case. We've provided some general information. I am the business owner of this, so assume that I am the line of business owner of this application. It is a general purpose AI assistant for all of our employees. We've seen a lot of these type of use cases where organizations want their own kind of like private version of GPT that they want to run, and they'll be able to use this without exposing all the corporate data to the outside world. So being able to build something like that internally with retrieval augmented generation capabilities, with a set of trusted data that we can point the AI solution at for its reference source, things like that. So it's one of those type of applications that we've proposed. We've captured the general information. We know that this, yes, uses generative AI. No, it's not externally facing. So this is just for internal purposes. So we're gathering some of the data points that will help determine the risk factors and the obligations that we have, right? If something this is external, there might be some extra checks you want to build in to make sure that it's safe to do that. Some extra security measures, some extra accuracy metrics, for example. For internal facing audiences, that might not be necessary. You might have some other requirements. So this is the type of data that we collect to make sure that we understand what this use case is about, and we can do an accurate assessment. Now, we've done the risk assessment. I'm not going to talk into that in the context of this webinar right now, but we've done an assessment of the use case a little bit broader than just the AI Act. One of our colleagues has a great expression, lawful but awful. There are things you can do with AI that are perfectly fine from a legal perspective, but they're very silly and bad for your reputation. So for that broader perspective, we have a library of AI risks that you can use, and you can use that as a reference point to understand, for this use case that we have here, what are the things we want to manage from a risk management perspective. So just kind of adjacent to the regulatory risk side, we're kind of a broader set of capabilities for another day. To get into the regulatory side then, so what we've done is we have done an assessment here of this use case. I promised that's where we were going to pick up. This one is categorized as being limited risk. So it's not one of the high risk use cases. It's not one of the prohibited AI systems, but it is something that, because it's a chatbot type interface, it does have some disclosure requirements. So we need to make sure that the users understand that they are engaging with an AI system, right? That's the core of those transparency requirements in the AI Act, and in some other country obligations as well, some other country laws as well, and state laws in the US if that's where you're doing business as well. So we've made that determination. Our compliance position is not yet determined. That's what I'm going to take you through right now. Just to give you a quick look of where that categorization comes from. We've built, that comes with the software. You can take them as is, you can adjust it, you can replace it with your own if you want to. But we have an assessment questionnaire that helps the use case owner answer a series of questions to help determine, does the AI Act apply? If yes, is it prohibited? Is it high risk? Is it limited? And so on and so forth. So based on the questions I gave it, the list could be slightly longer or shorter. If we determine it's prohibited, right? It's just going to stop after the first couple of questions. It doesn't go further. This one is not prohibited, so we keep on continuing through the assessment. And at the very end of that, I'm not going to stop by all of these questions, but at the end of that, the conclusion might be that your system may be subject to certain transparency obligations. So that's kind of the code word for, right? It's not high risk, it's not prohibited, but there are, right? Because we've got an AI system that interacts directly with natural persons. There are some obligations that we have from a transparency perspective. Contact your compliance department. I've indicated that yes, I'm a good boy. I will do that. Let's assume I have done that, and together we've determined that yes, indeed, this is something that we have some transparency obligations that I want to take care of, and I make sure that we attach to this use case so that when we go develop these things, we can develop it with those obligations in mind to make sure that we do it the right way and that we capture the fact that we've done it the right way. So if I go back to my use case, again, as I mentioned, we don't have a determination of a compliance position yet. That's what I need to start doing right now. But what I can do from here is I can add a new compliance plan. So compliance plan is a set of obligations that go together. So you can see here, we've got a number of different ones. If you are a deployer of a high-risk system, you got a set of obligations. If you are the maker of a general purpose AI model, you have a set of obligations. So what I want to do in this case is pick the one that is the transparency requirements from the EU AI Act. I can see that there are 7 obligations in here. So that's a relatively short list. We have them, I think the one for high-risk developers is something like 55 obligations, because then you have to do a lot more work, right? There's more things you have to do if you're the ones that make a high-risk AI system. This one is only 7. For this demo, I'm going to pick another one that covers the same transparency obligation, but is a little shorter still. So we do have one from the state of Utah in the US. Now, this is not relevant for this use case at hand because we're not deploying this in Utah, but this one has only 2 obligations. So for a demo, I'm going to pick this one just to keep it a little short. It gets a bit repetitive after 2 of seeing me attach documents and attaching evidence to these requirements. So this does cover transparency requirements. So it's in the same spirit. It's just that for this demo purpose, it is a bit simpler. It keeps the demo a little lighter. And what we do is we take that over from the library. It's attached to this use case, and we can now start managing this. And like I mentioned, all of these things are tracked. We know exactly who does what. So if I go to the activity tab, this now shows that on this day, on this time, I've added this compliance plan to it. So it keeps track of all the activities that happen. And if I go back to my compliance plan, I can see I also have the 2 obligations that go with that. So a little bit shorter list just for practicality of this demo. But I can see I need to provide evidence. There's a system in place to clearly and conspicuously disclose that a person is interacting with a generative AI and not a human, if asked or prompted by the person. So that's a requirement from the Utah AI Act, let's call it that if a user asks, the system needs to be able to respond saying, yes, I am an AI. And the other requirement that's there is at the start of an exchange, right, either written or orally, depending on the situation, we need to disclose that a person is interacting with generative AI. So that's something, in the case of a chatbot, something we would probably put on the UI, a little header or a footer to notice, or maybe a little checkbox at the beginning that they have to tick the box that they're aware, right? We can design that in different ways. That's not what we're here to prescribe, but it needs to be done one way or another. So I now have these 2 things I need to do, and let's start this. Let's kick this into action. Oops, sorry, I clicked the wrong one there. I meant to pick my compliance plan. And I can now start the process for this. So, that's sometimes some of these things are automated here. We've decided on this demo system to make this a manual step, so we kind of explicitly can show you that I'm now the use case owner. I want to put this into action. It says, actually, wait, you forgot something. You need to tell me who the compliance officer is. So who is the person that's going to review this when you're done capturing your evidence? So let me go back here. Let me assign myself just to keep it a little simple. And let me try that again. That should now be set. And if I try that again, hopefully we should now be in good shape to run through this cycle that I had in the swim lane. So the guidance I now get from the system is review each obligation evaluation, in turn complete the evidence capture workflow. When all the evidence has been captured, the workflow will automatically advance and send the plan to the compliance owner. So that's why it needed that information about who's the next step in line, because that's going to be automated after we've attached the evidence that is required. It's going to go to me again, but then with my different hat on as the compliance owner. So looking at the obligation evaluations, those were those two things that were attached there. Let me put them in a separate screen to make that easier. And we can see both of those are tagged as with an evidence type of text. So depending on the obligations, there are different formats that evidence can take. In this case, we want a written description. Sometimes that could also be a yes/no button. Sometimes that could also be an attestation where somebody kind of claims and they officially attest that they've done the work that is required. It could be a metric, right, for something like a bias requirement to measure bias. That's something that could be represented in a number. So depending on the obligations, there are different forms that can take. We've got that all tagged here. That's all listed out. Again, you can take them as they are. You can adjust them if you want to your situation, if you want to change some of this. But let's go with the default setting. Let's open this first one. And this is now in the evidence capture state, that it shows it here at the top, saying it's in evidence capture. So the guidance is here, for each evidence category where it says yes, provide the evidence and attach or link documentation if you want to. So I can see a bit more information here about the description of this, the legal text that this is in. I can see that for this one, yes, it's documentation that is required and not a metric and not an attestation and not something else. So here's a section, the documentation evidence is where I can attach that written description. That could be a file that I attached. That could be a link to a description that lives elsewhere. If I capture that information in Jira, in Confluence, in whatever other tooling that we're using as part of our AI development process, we don't have to replicate that all here, but we need to have a way to assess that evidence. So it could be a link, could be a document. In this case, I've got a document that I want to upload that the application designer that's created the UI, they have given me a screenshot and a description of what this will look like and how this will work when we get to production. So I've got that Word document here. And I can add a little description of it. I'm not going to do that right now, but I'm going to add that document here to my use case. That's the evidence that's been provided. As the use case owner, I go chase the app developer to give me that information. We might have a certain template within our organization that we use to make it a little bit easier, right? Whatever form, how we plan on doing that. Somehow, somewhere, we need to get the evidence, and that's what I've done now here. So this one is now complete. I can mark it as such. And I'll quickly do the same thing. You can see this one is now in an awaiting assessment stage. So it moved on in the workflow to the next stage. I need to do the second one as well. So just to keep that simple, I'm going to reuse that same document. I'm not going to make it more difficult than we have to for today. Let's assume that document has the evidence for both of those obligations in one place. And I can capture that one as well. So that means that my two obligations are now done. This is now awaiting the compliance assessment. So we've gone from capture into the assessment mode, that little loop there at the top right of the swim lane that I showed. So I can close the screen. And this thing is now, this compliance plan is now in compliance assessment. As mentioned, this is now automatically presented to me as the compliance officer to do the work. Because I'm the same user, I can continue here, right? You keep it simple. If this was somebody else, if this was Gurpreet, who was named as the compliance officer, he would have to go in, he would see it in his dashboard, he would have it in his task list, and he would continue with the work. So to simulate that a bit, I'm just going to change my profile. I'm not going to log in and out. I'm just going to change my view on the system. I also have a view of this as the compliance officer. And there I can see that I have got two obligations to assess in this widget here. So I'm trying to select that, but it wants me to move the dashboard. So I'm not going to do that. But these are those 2 obligations that I now have as a compliance officer with that hat on, where I need to go do something. So let's look at it from that perspective. Review the evidence provided, determine the assessment results, and I can send it back to the owner for additional updates if I want to. When complete, use the action button. Okay, so I'm asked to provide an assessment result. I can say, do I think this is met or not met? I want to look at that Word document that was attached, read it, to see whether I think it meets the requirements as stated in the legal text. With my legal hat on, I might say, yep, I'm happy with this. I can add a little description of it, review the doc, I concur, or something like that. And with that information saved, I can now mark this as complete, or if there is something, I can return it for an update, as mentioned, that arrow back. Let's assume in this case I'm happy with what they've done. I'm gonna close that here. This list is now gone from 2 to 1. There's 1 more I need to do. I think you get the point at this point how this works. I'm not going to continue doing that, but that's kind of how that process is run. Again, the workflow that sits behind this is something you can take as is. You can adjust it to your situation. If you want to have an extra step in here somewhere, you can adjust that workflow and do that with another person. Maybe there's in some cases, you want a second line review from legal or something like that. So you can adjust that. The questionnaires are there. The compliance plans are there. The obligations are there. They're all there as a starting point for you to take and kind of quickly get going with this. And as you learn, maybe you want to make some changes as you go along. So to make those changes, again, if I go back to my dashboard as the compliance officer, I can do my compliance maintenance from here. There's 23 compliance plans on this system. 14 of them have been activated. The other ones might be for geographies where we don't do business, so we don't bother turning them on. I can do that from here. And I can look at my reporting, just looking at the clock. I'm just quickly going to show that, and then I'm going to stop talking. I can look at this from, this is one particular business unit that we have. High Oaks Bank is part of our organizational structure. And I can see in aggregate here, we've got 5 compliance plans. Together, there's 55 obligations. 10 of them are met, 0 are not met, so the other ones are in progress. There's things that we're still working on. We're gathering the evidence, and we're assessing these things, and so on and so forth. But this looks at it more at an aggregated view, so I can see if things are progressing, if there's any bottlenecks I need to work with the business unit leaders maybe to resolve, and things like that. So hope that was helpful as kind of a quick step through this process here that was highlighted in the red box. With that, I've done enough talking. Gurpreet, back to you for any kind of last questions and comments and closing, please.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Martijn. That was super helpful. I think everybody found it useful, and you covered a lot in those 30 minutes. So
yes, and this is only 10% of the software. So
yes, and I think that's the whole idea, that it's a very comprehensive solution, and it can be customized as per the needs of the organization as well. So that hope you got that idea, and then obviously feel free to reach out to Martijn and the IBM team to book a demo. You can reach out to Align and our team as well, and we can walk you through this and also provide other services on top. So I'm going to just reshare my screen. Let me know. I hope you can see it now. So I've only got a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to spend a lot of time on this slide. So this is basically how aiming for this compliance and investing in AI governance tooling and the processes and people is not just a tick box activity. It's actually a competitive advantage, which I've mentioned before as well. So it gives you quite a few strategic advantages. And I'll share this slide deck with you guys, so you will have this for reference later on. So this important thing I wanted to touch base on next was that I've created this 9-month plan here, so in 3 phases, so each of 3 months there. So now till January, so your assess phase, and then you have your phase 2, which is your build phase, where you implement your governance platform, integrate with AI systems, develop your quality management system, so on and so forth. And the phase 3, which is the deploy, where you complete your conformity assessment, CE marking, register high-risk systems in EU database, activate your continuous monitoring for high-risk systems, all the things that are necessary from the compliance perspective. You can do that in a phased manner. So especially for large enterprises, it needs considerable time and effort to achieve and do this. So better to start now rather than waiting for that deadline to approach. So that's the message here. And again, as I said, I'll share this with you guys instead of talking through each and every bullet point here. Now, so the critical item here is to want to emphasize is that your AI inventory must be complete by January to inform everything else. If you don't have your AI inventory, you can't do the rest of the process around it. So you need to have a system in place where you can start capturing your inventory and then you can start doing your assessments. So the prohibited systems, they're already in place, so that needs to be addressed immediately. You can't wait for that. Also, the governance platform selection should happen in now to allow adequate implementation time. And if you need like notified body involvement, start those relationships in Q1 because so I'm Q1 of 2026. So because capacity is going to be a constraint as well. So 9 months sound like a lot of time, but it is not, especially for large enterprises. So organizations that start now would glide across this finish line. And then the ones who will wait till April, they will be in a crisis mode. And just to wrap up, I have got some resources which I'll be sending you in the email, follow-up email after this. Probably I'll be sending that tomorrow morning, first thing tomorrow morning, where I'll send you this AI Act Readiness assessment. So you can do this. It's a 10-minute assessment. Also, we'll send you the links and information to schedule a more detailed one-to-one session from a governance platform demo perspective or anything else you want to discuss from AI governance perspective. And also, we'll be sharing link to some other useful resources, including something that Martijn mentioned is the AI Risk Atlas, which is a very comprehensive risk atlas that IBM has produced, and it's publicly available, and we'll include a link to that as well, along with the other things that are mentioned here. So mindful of the time, I think we run out of time, so we won't have much time for Q&A, but if you can, I think Sargam has, from our team, has kindly shared our LinkedIn profile links there, so you can connect with me or Martijn and ask questions there. We'll be more than happy to respond back to you or engage in that conversation. But I would like to, again, now for everybody who took time out and joined this session, genuinely like to appreciate and thank you for your time here. Hope you find value in this session. Follow our Align page for more sessions. We are planning quite a few more webinars in this series. So do follow us on LinkedIn and stay up to date. But again, thank you, and look forward to that, reaching out to you tomorrow for the email, and then reach back if you have any questions, and we'll be more than happy to set up those sessions with you guys. So thank you, Martijn, for your presentation today.
Yeah, and you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Take care,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you, Martijn. Thank you, Gurpreet. Bye.
Cheers.